Welcome to the Soul Path Sessions podcast with Deborah Mines-Pearson and Brenda Littleton. Brenda is an educator and counselor rooted in Jungian and eco-psychology. She helps her clients understand the importance of the mind, body, spirit, and earth relationship for healing. Deborah is a licensed psychotherapist and has been trained in traditional and sacred psychology, exploring from the ground up what makes our human experience meaningful, wholesome, and enlightening. Deborah and Brenda invite you to accompany them on a soul path journey as they explore the possibilities of living a more soulful life as therapists, seekers, and lovers of fate.
Welcome to Soul Path Sessions. I'm here with my friend, co-therapist, fellow sojourner, Brenda Littleton. And welcome.
Welcome, Deborah.
Yay.
How are you? It's been a while. Good to see you.
It's been a long time, I know. I really want to start this podcast by dedicating it to Karen Roth, who left her body last month. And she was a dedicated listener, learner. At one point we were talking and she said, this show really helps. And she was a brilliant woman and so full of joie de vivre, creative and curious and comical. And she said, you're doing a public service and I look forward to it. So, Karen, this one's for you. We love you.
We maybe continue in your spirit. Thank you.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you for mentioning her
today. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Never to be forgotten.
So, what are we up to today, Deborah?
Well, this started. It's all interesting things too, with a thought that came to me, which is life is happening for me, not to me. And then followed by another thought that I could see internally these particles that were wanting to be activated, like they were in suspension. They were like potentiality. They were like little flecks of gold. So I started thinking, gee, I've heard about the God particle, but I know that's a real sciencey thing that's very difficult to explain, on a quantum level. At least it's difficult for me. So when I looked it up, what was legible and understandable to me is that it's this God particle gives empty space mass to everything. So everything comes out of nothing, so to speak, and everything comes out of this thing you can't measure. It's both empty and full.
It's the original container.
Bueno, that's what it was. So the original container. So what this did for me and is doing for me is when I don't know what to do, I activate the God particle. I just call on it and then I let go and let the God particle activate.
So what's the spell? What's the conjure? So you're in a moment where there's some tension, some indecision, some instant you need to respond quickly. You don't know. You say, the God particle.
Yeah, and I even use it for things like free time. Sometimes the burden of free time for me is, what do I do? What do I don't do? Do I don't do? Do I do? Do I meditate? Do I not? I mean, I'll get into that kind of heady place and I'll just activate the God particle. I do see the particles. They're little, for me, they're little gold flecks.
Nice.
And I just wait and I wait. And I remember that poem. I think I've said it in one of our podcasts that I committed to memory many years ago. I think it was in my 30s. It's called The Native Prayer. I don't know who wrote it, but it says, when I am lost in the fog of confusion, I stop and I wait and I stand very still until the great light of certainty shines on me. And then I move with swiftness.
So as I listen, my version, my interpretation that I've been working with is not so much the God particle per se, but the molecules, the molecular level, the frequency of my molecules. And it's very much akin to David Hawkins' power or force. And working with the frequency 400 and above, love has been relegated and muscle tested to be a frequency of 400. So love or above. And getting my molecular internal structure functioning in that frequency isn't just about my body and my energy as it is viewing the world and connecting to those God particles, those gold flakes that you're talking about. So it's very much an inward flow with the outside interaction. And so I'm listening, because I don't think of it so much as a God particle, although I have studied the God particle as the original container and the expansion. So I'm really, really curious at the application. And so, because both of us approach the same mysteries with almost the same language. So let's unpack this. And how can we live this every single day?
Yeah, I think it starts with an experiment. I remember years ago when I was reading Paramahansa Yogananda autobiography of a yogi, and he said, "Don't believe it." It was like, "Don't believe me, just try." And I was like, "Okay, I don't have to believe it, but just pretend. Pretend that their universal love is with you, is you, and is helping you. Just do it.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it." And I did. I just remember thinking, I was going through a really hard time in my life. My dad had just died tragically. My grandfather had just died tragically. My dog had just died tragically. I mean, just the gray cloud was over me. And I remember thinking, what does anything mean? I remember just driving down the freeway and saying, what difference does it make if I'm even alive? If I took my hands off the wheel, and I'd hurt other people, so I wouldn't do it. And I'd hurt my mom and all that stuff. But I really felt that low. And so I remember Paramahansa Yogananda, because I started reading good books. Be Here Now, Autobiography of a Yogi. These are my fundamental books.
Alan Watts back then, too.
Alan Watts, yeah. And all of a sudden, it's just a little drop-in idea. Just take a class at Golden West College. Like, well, I'm not a California resident yet, so I guess I could. And one thing led to another. Took the sociology of love, and I began to open up to this, all the things I was studying, and it brought me deeper into meeting the man that I married and had 3 beautiful children with, and had the most amazing life in my castle on the hill, us being warriors and explorers together. But it was just this little, to me it comes in as a little light, a little infinite. It's like, wait for it. I mean, don't believe it, but wait for it.
And then how did you identify it?
It feels heightened. Like when I met Jerry, for instance, when I went to the class, for instance, something happened there. Like you were saying, the 400 megahertz, or what is the energy? How do you measure it?
It's the basis of kinesiology and muscle testing.
Yeah.
And there's a whole scale from 0 to 1,000.
Yeah, David Hawkins is an interesting guy.
And I found him about 20 years ago, and then there's YouTube just has all his original lectures from Stanford, and then he went back to Harvard, and he's an MD that became a physicist.
I've seen him. He's fascinating.
And he spent his last few years in Sedona and died about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had given classes at his church, the Center for Spiritual Living in Sedona.
Oh, cool.
But his work has been picked up by many people, and then it kind of seeped its way into academics as kinesiology. So in sports medicine, when you're dealing with inflammation. And so I was united with his work when I was dealing with inflammation from a broken back and ribs, and how can I repair, on a frequency level. And so it's also part, the products would be the Biomat or the Beamer or those infrareds and energetic mats that you can lay on, and it helps the molecules reorganize and repair. There's a company in Nelson, British Columbia called FLFE, and it's Frequency Life something Force, energetic force, and you can subscribe to them for, I think, $30 a month, $35, and they will stream the energy to either your phone, a personal object, or your actual real estate. And it's all based on Hawkins' work.
Does William Tiller have anything to do with that? Because I know when I saw him,
I don't know.
in my PhD program, he was really a fascinating person, but
Yeah.
he talked about superluminal particles and intentionality, and he had some little device that people could have. He was working with children on the autism spectrum, and they were getting, he said they came in at such a high frequency, they had to be brought down to like the frequency we typically travel at in order to not be so hypersensitized.
Well, that makes open up the conversation of ADHD, like all the new higher frequencies coming in and how we try to normalize them.
Yeah, and we pathologize a lot of them too.
Pathologize, and what would happen if we didn't, and to the point of why aren't we on the frequency, or why aren't we on the spectrum?
Right.
What happened to us? Why aren't we on the frequency?
I think it's because I think we can play with frequencies, but all of the spiritual teachings that have helped me ground. And in many cultures, including ancient Indian culture and most of the Asian cultures, children are taught to meditate.
Yeah.
They're taught to ground that energy in the body and to let it, not just pull it up, to let it flow through the body, not just have the fritties of the mind spinning all the time, but to get it down into the heart chakra, the tummy, out to the feet.
And allowing, one of the meditations that works for me is doing all of the, entrance and then through the body, but then rooting down into the ground.
Yes.
And finding that place. For me, it's a constant river that's underground, and my feet go into that river that's moving, and then the intertwining roots of trees also kind of wrap around my feet in that space and ground me. Because I do know I do better work with this planet if I'm grounded.
Yeah.
Because I can just space out and
Buzz around.
Yeah,
that's tree pose in yoga. That's what they ask you to really think about when you're standing on one leg, because you are rooted and you're reaching up. So learning to ground. Now, you asked me a question I want to answer for the listeners, because they're probably wondering what you asked me. A very specific question. How do I know when I'll just say my prayer has been answered? I'm going to make it that simple. And it's super obvious because I'm looking one of the parts of spiritual path is to be here now and to notice. So, for instance, going back to my story of despair, I can feel the energy shift when I walked into that classroom, Sociology of Love. I felt heightened. I became more awake. I felt deeply interested. I was interested in the people I was meeting. They were different people. The other thing I noticed is when I met Jerry, who was my husband for many years, when we just met, and I looked down at my womb and it was glowing gold. I didn't have a frame of reference for that, but it turned out that we came together specifically for the purpose of building things together, but also I was going to have my children with him. And when the children were raised, we got a divorce. Okay. The first time I saw my husband, Michael, he was glowing gold. So gold is a lot of
glowing gold.
I felt an instant connection with you.
Yeah.
Instant connection with you. Yeah, I can see the aura, and the aura looks different. The other thing, and some people out there may have the same experience, is my sinuses open up a lot of times when I shift into a higher frequency. It'll just like pop, 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 pop. So I'll wait for that. Like you were saying, the inflammation goes down.
And the somatic therapies are so important to be, as you're going through all the senses, in my mind, I'm checking off all the boxes of somatic therapy. It's like the sensates, the feelings, the clarity, the sinuses, the gut relaxing, the focusing in on key areas of the body, and then rooting it. And they're not that it is an equation or a recipe, but these are aspects to be aware of,
to notice. The other piece that's completely clear to me is what happens in nature. So often I will just have birds doing very clear things. Last year when Jerry, my ex-husband, was very sick, and we stayed close as a family, I was asking for help. I was actually praying with a friend, which I'm very, as you know, all about. And I looked out the window in Ocean Shores, and a pelican, a white pelican. We don't have pelicans that are white there. We apparently did that day. And it flew right in front of the window. I mean, literally like 20 feet from the window, which they don't do. They swim over the lake, or fly over the lake. And instantly when I saw that bird and I could see the red rim of its eye, it was sort of albino, I knew that that was a spirit bird. Yeah. And while I'm still in prayer with my friend, I said, the prayer's being answered. And the bird circled around the island, and sure enough, I said, but you got to come back just to confirm it. Made one swoop and went between the islands and disappeared. I looked up the meaning of the pelican, and it was generous family provider. With their, their big gullet, they bring those fish and they feed their babies.
They bring babies.
Yeah, and right.
Or that's storks.
Yeah, the storks. Well, they're very similar. Yeah. But the pelican is, in native lore, is supposed to prick its own breast to feed its babies. It will actually sacrifice for its family. Well, taking care of Jerry took us all banding together, and that's what I was praying about. I was like, how do I bring the family together? Because I'm here in Washington, and he's sick in the desert, and the kids are all over the place in different places, and we had to unify to spread love to him and help him, and it all came together. We all worked together as a family, and it's with stuff like that. It's like, I call it Captain Obvious when it happens, because it's just so timely.
So there's a sense of awakening and awareness. And for people who may want to include this into their lifestyle, or perhaps try that practice the practice, who don't, who are not somatically inclined, maybe more situated intellectually, and realize that there's some interest in this conversation. So what would be a good beginning step?
Well, if there's interest, then I say, don't believe me, just try. It really is Uptown Funk. I mean, what can it hurt you?
Oh, that song. Yeah. Now I'm dancing in my mind. Yeah.
I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, try it. If you don't like it, yeah. I know. It's kind of bringing a lightness of being. The other thing, I work somatically because we have bodies that attach our heads to. When people are really, really intellectual, we just do the body sweep. But we do body scan. We go down inside the body, like with a periscope, real slow, noticing hot, cold, pressure, heavy, light, color, temperature. And that instantly grounds us in a different brain.
And breathing, breath.
Oh, yeah, that always helps too. And the slow breathing, the real slow exhale.
I've been breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth.
Me too. Yeah.
And expanding that, not only in depth, but in duration and frequency. So as I was driving here, I was, spending about half hour breathing in the nose and out the mouth. And also focusing in on the molecules in my body, in certain parts of my body that I know are the hosts to inflammation that I would like to address or pay attention to, because it's getting my attention, and I don't want to ignore it and dismiss it and put it off and hope that it just takes care of itself, because that will only make it worse. So on the molecular, I actually go and close my eyes and breathing in, go into that area and see the inflammation, see the host cells, and ask them to vibrate at a higher frequency, at 400, 500 frequency. Just dance differently. And I let the myelin sheaths open up. And I have this whole army of Pac-Men that come in and they chomp, 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 and they eat away all the inflammation. And then this little tribe of fairies come in with a paintbrush, but it has full gold illuminated hot honey mustard custard, and they just So one chomps and one swishes and closes. Chomps, swish, and then breathing out in, and then I leave that area visually when I see the inflammation has been consumed, mitigated, transformed, and the cells feel like they're dancing.
Oh, nice.
And then I get out.
I love that. And the fact that your inner vision knows what to do.
Yeah. And it worked when I had breast cancer, and I had cervical issues back in my 20s and 30s. I worked with a medicine woman and did all of this intuitive work. And I've done it when I broke my back. I did it when I shot my eye out, and I wrecked my cornea, and I was scheduled for surgery. I redid all.
I mean, you shot your eye out.
I had a horse syringe with some meds and pain meds for my horse, one of them, and the syringe is, I don't know what, 11 inches, plastic tip. It was plugged. Push, would not go out. Just happened to turn it up on its end, and as I looked at it, it came out at me, and instead of hitting my chest or my chin, it hit my eye, and it blew out the cornea.
Oh no!
To the point where the physician said, "Well, we need surgery, but it's so messed up that you have to go home and take care of it, let it settle down for." When I went back 4 days later, they said, "I don't know what you did, but you don't need surgery." You know, and it was that same process. Pack, men chewing away. And I'm not saying that you only do this and forgo medical treatment.
No, but you're adding to it. You can't go wrong. Like what? I mean, really, when you think about it, you didn't risk anything.
I had to be on my own for 4 days anyways. So whatever. And again, don't believe it.
Just try it.
Just try it.
Yeah. And the thing I've learned to add to that is if something doesn't resolve, I like to invite it to tell me why it's here and how I can use it best.
What can you do? How can you help it?
Yeah, like maybe I'm meant to lay on my back. Maybe I'm meant to for a while, and to not create resistance, but truly like to go into the heart of it. Like Byron Katie said something really interesting. When they told her she was going to go blind, her response to that was to laugh, which is very strange. But Byron Katie is completely tuned in. And she thought, oh, that's an interesting twist. The plot thickens, this will be interesting. So she goes to this whole chapter on not being able to find the soap or the hot and cold and wearing mismatched socks and and how it was just interesting to her. And she had no resistance. And then a surgeon, they did correct her vision, but she said it was just, I just went with it. And I thought, I'm going to add that to the mix. So recently when I hurt my back golfing, overdoing it, which is my specialty, in addition to doing all the things you're talking about, like trying to work with it, and it wasn't resolving, the other voice that came to me, I activated the God particle, and I said, okay, what can I know about this that I don't know? And it just said one word: moderation. It just came through. It's a really important thing for me to learn moderation. I tend to go very fast, and my kids would tell you how fast I can go, just like cleaning and doing stuff. I mean, I'll do 2 or 3 things at the same time.
Multitasking.
And the voice came to me. Moderation is this beautiful, slow it down and be more mindful.
Yeah. It's the active imagination part of the Jungian therapy is listening, asking. And so moderation is your guest, your hosting.
Humility. Being very humble. The fact that I'm in a body. I'm in an aging spacesuit, as Ram Dass talked about it. I'm very grateful for it. And I need to be in tune.
Yeah.
I mean, these sound like nothing, but they're huge to me.
Yeah.
Because they're subtle noticings.
God particle, the ultimate container. We're in it and we are it. And I love the idea of being able to acknowledge what is there, looking beyond our own self-limitations as to what's possible. I'm glad to hear another your version, another way of talking about the container or the frequency of working on a molecular level. And I really appreciate the idea of recognizing, like, there's a sense of embodiment, there's a sense of uncoding in the body, recognition. So for those that want to spend more time in somatic, part of understanding the baseline, like do a survey of your body from the top to the bottom as to the current status. Is there a sense of density, or is there a sense of sensitivity, or is there a sense of openness? And then check in. When I work with clients on a somatic level, in its very first, is I have them check in every morning and night for 5 days, and just develop be a sense of awareness and attunement, making notes, and actually deciding where they would prefer to be. Like in this case, the sense of enunciation, what I would call enunciation, awareness.
Yeah.
It comes in, and I love the idea of your sinuses opened up.
Yeah, they always do. Wow. They pop up. And when I speak to the people on the other side, out of the body people, who are much more alive than we are, so it's hard to call them dead, because they laugh at that every time.
That's a curious comment.
But when that I know. But when that happens, I notice I'm instantly very happy, light. It's very seldom when I'm talking to someone on the other side that I feel sad. Yeah. They're usually very jokey and funny and very expanded, and so that's the highest one. The connecting to the divine, connecting to folks who live closer to the vibration of the divine, is divine. And when that happens, and my whole body lights up, and I'm just having a great conversation and helping someone. I don't do this professionally, because it happens professionally sometimes, but it's they live with us, among us, in finer particulates, close to us, with us, enjoying. I can feel Karen right now, and she's clapping her hands and she's laughing because she's having a terrific time.
Wow. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, she's with her family too.
So with the God particle, let's go talk to the other side as we
go.
Check out. Thank you.
All right, this was fun, Brenda.
Thanks, Deborah.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Soul Path Sessions podcast with Deborah Mines-Pearson and Brenda Littleton. If you'd like to hear more about living a more soulful life, please subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to check out the show notes and links below. For more information from Deborah, visit soulpathsessions.com, and for Brenda, brendalittleton.com. Thank you for listening, and remember to follow your soul. It knows the way.